Family business makes no sense. So let's talk about it.
Welcome to another episode of Family Business Makes No Sense. This series of 50-odd videos explores the reasons why, through the lens of conflict, putting a family and a business together into a family business makes no sense. Because all the things that make a business work well are in direct contradiction to the things that make a family work well. But we know that there are lots of good family businesses out there and an awful lot more not so good family businesses. So today we're going to explore why it is that parenting styles and practices can be a root cause of the conflicts that affect and afflict sometimes otherwise very successful, materially successful businesses, but eventually emerge to create major problems both within the business and within the families that support them. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. Over many years, I've worked with a great many families in business, fundamentally helping them to remove blockages and stresses caused by conflict that has arisen, often as a form of unintended consequence, and is threatening to create major problems, both in the family and in the business, or more often has already started creating those problems. Now, there's one thing that I've learned over those years. It's that where a lot of problems present themselves as issues of money, finance, greed, entitlement, and so on, far more often, in fact almost invariably, the root causes of those conflicts are historical and they lie in the family's story, and they are more to do with relationship breakdowns and senses of unfairness than they are to do with senses of legal entitlement. Consequently, they respond very much better to empathic problem-solving responses than they do to legal threats, emotional blackmail, or rational arguments. So what we're going to do today is help to develop a better understanding of why the parenting styles and practices adopted back sometimes in the very distant past, decades earlier, may be one of the root causes of conflict that is now impacting a family in business. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how you might be able to prevent that becoming a problem to future generations, or if it's already established problem, how to deal with it to best effect for current family business members and people affected by family businesses. If this is interesting to you, please buckle up and come along for the ride. Let's start this particular journey by considering parenting as a thing. We all had parents. If you weren't aware, that's how you got here. And most of the people looking at this video, I suspect, or listening to the podcast, will be parents of anything from small kids to maybe children in their 5th or 6th decade of life. So if you've been through the parenting process yourself as a parent, you'll realize that a lot of us, most of us in fact, might have got lots of advice, but most of us were making it up as we went. You were trying to do the best by your family according to the situation you found yourself in, and if that situation was massively compounded by having to put in huge hours and huge effort to keep a business running to support the family, that made an already really difficult task close to impossible unless you were very well supported by family, maybe a spouse with lots of emotional intelligence and support for the kids and so on, who was able to fill the gaps that you weren't able to fill yourself because he spent so much time working. Also, the models of parental support, parental style and so on have changed dramatically over the last 50 to 100 years, no question about that. So if we accept the fact that a lot of parenting is unable to produce the sort of supports and the sort of models that enable kids to grow up as highly competent problem solvers, communicators, with strong emotional resilience and good coping skills, if the parents weren't able to transfer those skills onto their kids, then we can say that some of the trouble we may be having with individuals now can be sheeted back to those particular problems, which in some ways is a lot more helpful for problem solving and conflict resolution than saying, this guy's a total dickhead and we can't do anything with them. It turns them into perhaps a little bit more of a victim, although let's not go too far down that track. And it means they become an object that we can perhaps empathise with and sympathise by saying they didn't necessarily want to be what they have become. It was kind of foisted upon them as a consequence of the environment they grew up in. Now, in dispute resolution generally, it's often very helpful to be able to ground the cause of conflict in the situation rather than say it was entirely caused by the individuals because they're basically nasty people. That enabled us to go pretty hard on the problem and relatively easy on the people, so that ultimately, particularly in a family business setting, we can bring the business out on the other side of any conflict workout in better shape, and we don't burn the people at the stake in the process of doing it. And in fact, we transfer knowledge and skills to them, which should make them better people as well. So double dip in terms of benefits. So going back to parenting styles, we find it useful just to frame it up very simply by saying there are perhaps 4 different major styles, and then they can also be further influenced by parenting characteristics. The styles are these. The first one is dictatorial. This is where the parent, and these people often turn into entrepreneurs, really have only one gear, and it's full tilt, full forward, no looking over the shoulder, no worrying about what's behind, and they basically dictate to everybody around them what's going to happen, whether they like it or not. These people don't provide a lot of guidance to their children on the way through. They just give them firm boundaries and rules, which in many cases, very much like the entrepreneurs that we also talk about in others of our videos and podcasts, they tend to create emotionally damaged progeny. Might be very bright, might be very successful, but the model that they've been exposed to has in large measure crushed their spirits when they were young, and some of these people don't recover. The next type, the next style of parenting is the authoritative. Now, these are parents who aren't shy about providing guidelines, rules, directions to their kids, but they do it in a way that is more reasoned, there's more explanation, it's a bit more collaborative, and they're there to help pick up the pieces when things go a little bit wrong. So they are really much more engaged in where the kids are going to go, if that's their parenting characteristic. So the authoritative parent is the one that does create shape, does model a degree of strength, decisiveness, problem solving and all the rest of it. And they tend to not regard themselves as their parents' friend, as their children's friend, but they are very clear, we are the parents, we are the adults in the room when the kids are little, and it's our responsibility to protect and look after you. That means you need to do more or less what we say, and we will take a little bit of conversation about how that works out. We then cross the Rubicon and we move into a a very different style, and the first of those is the permissive style. And arguably, a lot of modern parenting is more about empowering kids than it is about creating really firm boundaries and guidelines, sometimes because of the fear that those boundaries and guidelines are not entirely politically correct. Permissive parents can still be very engaged in their kids' upbringing, but they believe that by allowing the children to have quite a big say in setting their own boundaries and doing their own thing and not necessarily being answerable back, the child will have a happier life and will develop in a more natural way. So the permissive parent is the one that is still may still be engaged, but is giving far less direction to their child. The model is one of permission, is not of authoritative strength, direction and responsibility. Which leads us to the final style, which is the disengaged parent, and essentially they don't care. Kids look to them and scratch their heads because they know instinctively they should be getting some guidance and some direction, but whatever they do get from those parents will be inconsistent if it's there at all. It may or may not be appropriate. Because they're disengaged, it really won't be appropriate to the situation the child is in, and therefore it is a pretty unhelpful model if you believe that the job of the parent is like the job of the business manager to do themselves out of a job. To raise kids to be self-sufficient so they can manage their own lives, take on responsibility for their own destiny, hopefully wanting the parents to be around because they enjoy their company and still value their insights and inputs, but not needing them to be around if situation and circumstances determine they're doing their own thing. Now, on top of those 4 different styles, you've also got 4 characteristics. And these are simply responsive and unresponsive parents and demanding and undemanding parents. So if you run that particular lens over each of the 4 styles, obviously we've got responsive parents. You're not going to find dictatorial parents being very responsive other than in a disciplinary way. They're not going to be very responsive to the needs of the kids. Unresponsive means they just pass out their orders and don't care beyond that. Either the order gets carried out or not, the baton may fall or the baton may not, but they're just not engaged. When we look at it and they may be demanding, their style may be demanding, or it may just be, this is the deal, these are the rules, I don't care, that's what it's all about. Authoritative, undemanding, because you don't necessarily have high expectations. And that works all the way through the other styles. So without needing to go through them all, you can see that it's a complex mix, and no parent is going to fall 100% of the time into any of those models. Now, if we are able to unpack the family's history and understand that the perception is a particular parenting style has had a lot to do with producing the nature of the individual we now see in front of us, it becomes a great deal easier to be empathetic and even sympathetic to the situations that they found themselves in and the situations they've caused, than if you say this person is just a total asshat and there's no hope for them. In which case, we tend to look for external solutions, not internal collaborative solutions. So, if we're looking for strategies and solutions to deal with developed problems that we think may have an ancient cause right back in the playroom and the growing up years, which is fundamental to most family conflicts in our experience, first thing to do is do not jump to solutions. Get a real understanding of who the person is that's in front of you and why they are who they are, why they're behaving the way they're behaving, why they're interacting the way they interact with other family members. That means you have to unravel the family's story develop a broad narrative and use everybody's perspective to get that. Don't just take it from one person, because you'll find yourself in a situation where you hear the same things from different people and you wonder if we're actually talking about the same family. That's fundamental to mediation. But take it like unpeeling an onion. There's layer after layer after layer before you get to the heart of the onion, and there will almost certainly be tears as you do the unpacking. But when you get to the very core, things become quite clear, and you've now got an unpeeled onion you can make use of in some sort of recipe to improve things and put them back together again. The important thing is that as you dig through those layers and you recreate the family's narrative for different people, they are now adults where they were children. And so it's much easier to create a realistic perspective, or at least an acceptable perspective, of what is going on now from an adult position than it was as a child. From there, it may take little more than acknowledgement and validation and maybe apologies, maybe some notional reparations, to be able to bayonet that particular skeleton and then put it back in pieces in a closet somewhere and seal it up. Doesn't stop, doesn't change history, but it means the family has ventilated their emotional concerns, and if they've been able to do so, they've reconciled themselves to the problems of the past, the resentments that they've been holding towards parents and towards other siblings and so on, and it helps them to overcome those things and reconstruct a decent vision for the future that frees them a lot of the emotional baggage, which we've talked about before, coming from that parenting style. The point of the exercise is we want to hit a big reset button for the family so that future relations are far more comfortable and more constructive than they have been in the past. Done well, it's a hell of a journey with an enormous and very rapid positive impact. I hope you found this useful as an insight into the way family businesses can get themselves into trouble and why. If you found it useful, please like and please subscribe. Please come back in a week's time for the next thrilling episode. And if you know of somebody in another family business who may benefit from this, please pass the details on, because we're trying to get the word out. Jon Kenfield, Family Business Solutionist, signing off. Thanks for watching.